Okay guys, so now what we've got is our definition on page 61. We've also got an outline of the process, and now you've been provided with information on 2 examples that you can use in any question that isn't related to a stimulus. So we now need to just have a look at the exam practice in this area. So there are 4 kind of questions that you could be asked. First one is nice and straightforward, okay, so turn to page 70 in your booklet. It's just a 2-mark question that I referred to at the start of this lesson. In the context of social influence, explain what is meant by social change. I'd like to try and have a go at that for me now, please, if you can, without looking back in your booklet. Now, obviously, you've had a lot of information given to you. If you can't do it without looking back in your booklet, that's not a problem, as long as you kind of go back over this before the lesson, which you're going to have with your teacher, kind of like a recap lesson. So if you want to pause this video now and have a go at that question. We're then going to move on to the big 6-mark question. So using the social change process on page 62, answer question 2. The question states that you must refer to one or more examples. So the examples that we have given you are the civil rights movement, in particular Rosa Parks, and also the suffragettes. So I've provided you with, or your teacher has provided you with, an example answer. Okay, so outline processes involved in social change. I'm apologising in advance that this is a little bit blurry, but you should have already printed off this example. So this question does not need to be applied to a stimulus, but you still should be referring to examples. So all I want you to do is try to work your way through this, and if you need to go back to the process on page 62, by all means feel free to do that. But you just need to go through it and complete the blanks using that information. But you'll see that throughout this answer, it references Rosa Parks and it references the suffragettes. So you also need to not only use the information on page 62, which outlines the process, you need to use the information from page 63 that you've gathered in order to complete these sections here. Now, this will be checked in lesson by your teacher, so it is important that you complete that now, because that's the main goal of this session, for you to be able to complete that and to be able to do that kind of a question in your lesson. So if you can now again pause the video and have a go at completing this answer for me. Now, the next question that we've got in this area is an item question. Okay, so it's the same question. Look, explain how social influence leads to social change, and it's again worth 6 marks. But this time we've got an application to a stimulus. So you've got a reference to an article, so homosexuality, the biggest change of the last 30 years. So it references 30 years ago, almost 2/3 of the British public opposed same-sex marriage because they were morally wrong. These days, homosexuality is accepted, and the majority of British people support recent changes to the laws on gay marriage and adoption. So you've got to obviously refer to the article above to pick up marks in this area. And we find quite often on social change, this is the question that students find most difficult. So in order to help you, a sample answer. So you've already got this, or you should have already been provided with this. If you haven't been provided with it, then you need to print it off Moodle, as explained in part 1 of this lesson. So again, all we want you to do here is we want you to read this answer carefully. I'm not going to tell you the answers because your teachers will check that you've done this in lesson. Try and work your way through it and complete the gaps, okay? But notice that throughout this, there is reference to that stimulus, okay? So gay right activists, consistent reference to homosexuality and the same-sex marriage. So try to complete not only the sample answer from 2 slides ago where it was not attached to a stimulus, then you also need to try and do this one for us. These are going to be checked in your lesson. I can't make sure that that point is emphasised enough to you. So this is essentially the biggest part of your homework. Now, the next that we're going to have a look at with you, this here is just the mark scheme for the previous question, if you were interested in looking at how you pick up the mark. The next question that you are going to actually do in lesson to test that you've understood this area is a stimulus-based question. So I'm not going to provide you with a sample answer for this particular question. You can see that it's about smoking, okay? So people can smoke wherever they want and non-smokers had to put up with smoky atmospheres. However, in 2007, the government finally introduced a law banning smoking in public places, and those who smoke are limited in where they can smoke. So it's the same thing, okay? With reference to the above article, explain how social influence leads to social change. This is very similar to what you would get in an exam situation, a random stimulus where you're expected to come up with some examples to illustrate your point. So remember, it's already providing you with the change that has been made at the end, but what you've got to refer to, if you think back to the original process, if you've got to come up with some examples of how this particular issue was protested to begin with, what kind of education was given to people, what kind of advertisement campaigns were used to try and prevent smokers from not smoking in the future. These are all things that you've got to kind of do on your own back, really, in the examination. So we can give you a sample answer, as we have just done with the homosexuality, but we cannot predict what the stimulus is going to be. So you've got to be able to try and do this on your own. Now, we're already telling you what the question is going to be, but you are going to do this in your lesson. So what I would recommend that you do now is you try and write your answer out. You're going to do this under time conditions in the lesson where you're assessed on this knowledge, but try to practice this answer in advance. Get your process in there and get some good reference to the stimulus in there. Now, that's all we're going to be covering in this particular lesson. You will see there is some reference to evaluation material. So there is some supporting evidence, some criticisms that minority influence is indirect and it's delayed and it's a very slow process, but your teacher will cover these in more detail with you in that recap lesson, because the final question that we've got in this area is a 12-mark question, which is obviously an essay, and some of you are struggling with writing those essays. So I've explained how to obtain the first 6 marks. Your teacher will then pick this up with you in lesson and just look at how you would gather the last few marks, so the evaluation material. So revisit this video, any of the video clips that you need, but essentially what you've got to make sure you've done for your recap lesson is completed the 2 blanked answers, the 2 sample answers, and practiced writing an answer for the smoking stimulus. Go back through the process, make sure you've understood the key terms, but if you've repeated that and practiced it, then you should be absolutely fine for the recap lesson. Okay guys, I hope that's all been good for you.